Why do so many older men end up living alone after 60? And why does nobody warn them while there's still time to change the ending? Because if we're being honest, this isn't something that suddenly happens overnight, like flipping a switch. It's something that creeps in slowly, quietly, year by year. Conversation by conversation not had, emotion by emotion swallowed, until one day a man looks around and realizes the house feels bigger but emptier, quieter but heavier, and that silence isn't peaceful at all. It's loud, it echoes, it messes with your head. And here's the shocking part most people don't want to say out loud, especially not men themselves. Most older men didn't plan to be alone. They didn't dream of eating dinner by themselves, watching TV just to hear a human voice, or waking up without anyone asking how they slept. But life has a sneaky way of rewarding what you repeat. And for decades, men were taught, directly and indirectly, that their value came from what they provided, not how they connected. So they built careers, paid mortgages, fixed broken things, showed up physically, but slowly checked out emotionally. Not because they were bad men, not because they didn't care, but because nobody taught them another way. Their fathers were distant, their role models were stoic, and vulnerability was treated like a weakness instead of a skill. So they learned to keep things inside, to joke instead of talk, to work instead of feel. And it worked for a while, because society rewards productivity. But relationships don't run on productivity. They run on presence, and presence requires emotional effort. Effort that many men never practiced, so marriages slowly shifted. Conversations became logistical instead of meaningful. Kids grew up and stopped needing dad as much. And the man didn't notice at first because he was busy. Busy is the most dangerous word for a relationship. Busy sounds responsible, respectable, even noble. But busy is also a great excuse to avoid uncomfortable emotional work. And then one day retirement shows up like an uninvited guest. And suddenly, the structure that kept everything together disappears. No job, no daily purpose, no external validation. Just long days and longer thoughts. And this is where things really start to crack. Because many men tied their entire identity to being useful, to being needed. So when nobody needs them in the same way anymore, they feel invisible. And instead of saying, "I feel lost," they say nothing. Instead of asking for connection, they withdraw, because asking feels risky. And men their age were raised to avoid risk when it comes to emotions. They'll climb ladders, start businesses, fight wars, but saying, "I'm lonely," feels scarier than all of that combined. So the loneliness deepens. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Men often rely on one person for emotional support, usually their spouse, while women tend to build wider emotional networks. Friends, sisters, co-workers, people they talk to regularly. Men don't do that as much, so when a marriage ends, whether through divorce or death, the man doesn't just lose a partner. He loses his emotional safety net, and suddenly he's standing alone without knowing how to build a new one. And the world doesn't exactly make it easy. Because aging men aren't encouraged to socialize emotionally. They're told to stay strong, keep busy, don't dwell. But distraction isn't connection. And strength without support turns into isolation. And isolation changes people. It hardens them, makes them more rigid, more opinionated, less patient. And that pushes people away even further. Kids call less, friends drift. Invitations stop coming, and the man notices. But instead of looking inward, he creates a story to protect his ego. People are fake. Family is ungrateful. I'm better off alone anyway. And that story feels safer than admitting he misses people. Because missing people means admitting you need them. And need has been framed as weakness his entire life. So he doubles down on independence. Not realizing independence taken too far becomes isolation. And isolation isn't freedom. It's a slow emotional starvation. And what makes this even more shocking is how common it is. You see it everywhere once you start paying attention. Older men sitting alone in restaurants, walking alone in parks, living in houses filled with memories, but no current voices. And society shrugs and says, that's just how men are. But that's not true. That's how men were conditioned. And conditioning can be unlearned, but only if it's recognized. And most men never stop long enough to recognize it. Because stopping feels like failure. Slowing down feels like weakness. And introspection feels uncomfortable. But here's the thing nobody tells them. The men who don't end up alone after 60 aren't luckier. They're braver emotionally. They're the ones who learned, sometimes late, that relationships require maintenance, just like cars and houses. And ignoring the warning signs doesn't make the problem go away. It just makes the repair more expensive later. And right now, if you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds familiar, that's not an accident. That's awareness knocking on the door. And awareness is the first crack in the pattern. Because patterns don't break themselves, people break them. And it doesn't require becoming a completely different person. It requires becoming a more honest version of who you already are. And that honesty starts with admitting that being alone isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's the result of decades of emotional habits that once felt protective, but now feel suffocating. And this is only the first half of the truth. Because in the next part, we're going even deeper into why men resist change even when they know they're lonely, how pride quietly destroys connection, and what actually works if a man wants to rewrite his future instead of accepting a silent ending. So stay with me, because the most important part is coming next. And now here's the part that really stings. The part most older men feel in their gut, but don't like to admit even to themselves. Because once loneliness sets in, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It starts to change how a man thinks, how he reacts, how he sees the world. And instead of pulling him toward people, it convinces him to pull away even more. Because loneliness whispers lies that sound logical. It tells him people don't care anymore, that reaching out would make him look desperate, that he's already too old to start over socially, that nobody wants to hear his thoughts. And pride nods along like an old friend saying, yeah, better keep your dignity. Better not bother anyone. Better stay strong. But what pride doesn't tell him is that this version of strength is slowly costing him his life. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in tiny daily withdrawals. Fewer conversations, fewer laughs, fewer reasons to get up excited about the day. And over time, that emptiness turns into bitterness. Not loud anger, but quiet resentment, the kind that makes a man seem cold, distant, hard to talk to, and people feel that energy. They don't always know why, but they sense it. So they keep conversations short, visits brief. And that just confirms the man's belief that people don't want him around. So the cycle feeds itself. And here's what's really shocking. Many men know exactly where things went wrong. They replay moments late at night. Things they should have said, apologies they never gave, chances to connect they brushed off because they were tired or distracted or uncomfortable. And that regret hits harder after 60 because time suddenly feels louder. Birthdays come faster, losses stack up, friends pass away, and the future feels shorter than the past. And that awareness can either wake a man up or shut him down completely. Some men choose numbness, TV all day, routine without meaning, days blending together, and they call it peace. But it's not peace, it's avoidance. And avoidance doesn't heal anything, it just delays the pain. And then there are the men who get angry at the world. They complain about society, about younger generations, about how things used to be better. But deep down, the anger isn't really about the world changing. It's about feeling left behind by it, and nobody prepared them for that feeling. Nobody taught them how to rebuild identity after their main role was over, because for most of their lives, they were rewarded for being consistent, not adaptable, for being solid, not flexible. So when flexibility becomes necessary, they struggle. And that struggle doesn't mean they're weak. It means they were trained for a different game. But here's the turning point, the moment most men miss. Loneliness after 60 is not a life sentence. It's a signal. It's the body and mind saying something needs attention, something needs to change. And change at this age isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally allowing parts of yourself that were suppressed for decades to breathe. Curiosity, openness, emotional honesty. The willingness to say, I don't have all the answers. And yes, the courage to reach out first. Because waiting for others to make the move rarely works at this stage of life. Everyone assumes everyone else is busy or uninterested. So nothing happens unless someone breaks the silence. And that someone has to be you. And that's terrifying for men who are taught never to need anyone. But needing people doesn't make you small. It makes you human. And the men who turn things around after 60 usually do a few quiet but powerful things. Not all at once, not dramatically. They start small. They call one person instead of waiting. They listen more than they talk. They ask questions instead of giving lectures. They apologize without defending themselves. And that's hard, really hard. Because apologizing feels like admitting failure. But in reality, it's an invitation to reconnect. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, relationships soften, conversations deepen, and something incredible happens. The man starts to feel alive again. Not young, not invincible, but alive, present, engaged. And that presence changes how people respond to him. Kids open up more, friends linger longer, new connections form in unexpected places. Community groups, gyms, classes, volunteering, even casual conversations turn into meaningful ones when a man shows genuine interest instead of emotional armor. And here's something most people never talk about. Older men who allow themselves to be emotionally open often become incredibly attractive socially. Not in a romantic sense necessarily, but as companions, mentors, friends, because wisdom paired with humility is powerful. And suddenly the man who once felt invisible realizes he still has a place, still has value beyond providing, beyond fixing, beyond earning. And that realization is life-changing, but it only comes after letting go of the old belief that strength means silence. Because silence is what kept him alone in the first place. And this is where I want to speak directly to you. If you're listening to this and feeling uncomfortable, restless, maybe even a little exposed, that's not a bad sign. That means you're still emotionally awake. And being awake means you still have choices. The story doesn't end at 60 unless you decide it does. And deciding differently doesn't require perfection. It requires action, one honest action at a time. Reach out, speak up, reconnect, and if you're not sure where to start by admitting this simple truth: you don't actually want to be alone. And there is nothing weak about that. The real weakness is pretending you don't care, while loneliness slowly drains the color out of your life. So here's the suggestion I promised, and I want you to take this seriously. Not tomorrow, not someday, but soon. Choose one person, just one, and reach out without an agenda. No fixing, no advice, just connection. Tell them you were thinking about them. Ask how they're doing. Listen, really listen. And then do it again with someone else next week. Build momentum, not excuses. Because the future you experience after 60 is shaped less by age and more by courage. Emotional courage. And if this message resonated with you, if it put words to something you felt but never said out loud, leave a comment, share your experience, or share this with a man you care about. Because the fastest way to break loneliness is to talk about it, and the fastest way to help another man is to let him know he's not the only one feeling this way. Silence keeps men alone, but conversation brings them back to life.